The gleaming white Tesla sparkled under the summer sun as Natalie twirled the key fob around her manicured finger. Mom and Dad flanked her like proud peacocks, while photographers from the local society page captured the moment. "This will be perfect for your internship at Walker Construction," Mom gushed, smoothing Natalie's already perfect hair. "You need to make the right impression." I stood in the shadow of our family's sprawling colonial home, my acceptance letter to Westview's MBA program burning a hole in my pocket. The program I could no longer afford. Not since my parents had redirected my college fund to purchase my sister's graduation gift. My name is Rebecca Walker, and at 24, I watched my educational future dissolve while my younger sister received a $90,000 electric car. What my family didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that I had been playing a much longer game, one set in motion years ago by the only person who ever truly believed in me, my grandmother Eleanor Thomson. Family dinner at the Walkers had always been a carefully choreographed performance. Dad at the head of the table, regaling us with stories from Walker Construction, the mid-sized building company that had made our family comfortably wealthy. Mom beside him, hanging on every word while simultaneously ensuring Natalie's wine glass remained filled and her plate curated with her favorites. Then Natalie, perpetually center stage, tonight bubbling about her upcoming internship, the position Dad had created specifically for her in the marketing department despite her middling grades in her communications degree. And then there was me, Rebecca, seated at the far end, the practical daughter who had worked her way through community college, transferred to state, and graduated with honors in business management while working full-time. The daughter whose accomplishments were acknowledged with polite nods before conversation swiftly returned to Natalie's latest triumph. In this case, the prestigious internship that everyone knew would lead to a cushy executive position. "The office is gorgeous," Natalie gushed, gesturing with her fork. "Daddy had them completely renovate the east wing. I'll have a corner view of Riverside Park." "Nothing but the best for my girl," Dad said, his chest puffing with pride. "The future face of Walker Construction deserves it." I pushed my potatoes around my plate, biting back the observation that construction clients might respond better to experience than to a pretty face. I'd learned long ago that such comments were dismissed as jealousy. "Rebecca," Mom said suddenly, as if remembering, "I was there. How's your work going? Are you still at that little accounting firm?" "Financial analysis firm," I corrected, straightening. "And yes, we just landed the Richardson account. It's a significant expansion for the company." "That's nice, dear," Mom said with the same tone she used when admiring a child's crayon drawing. "More potatoes?" Before I could respond, Natalie jumped in. "Oh, did I tell you? Jeremy Richardson's son asked me to the charity gala next month. His family practically owns half of Lakeside." And just like that, the spotlight swung away, drawn to Natalie's magnetic field. I'd grown used to the shadows. In fact, I'd learned to use them to my advantage. What my family never saw was the life I'd built beyond our carefully manicured lawn. They didn't see the network I'd cultivated among Lakeside's business community. They didn't see the night classes or the certifications. They certainly didn't see my small downtown apartment where the walls were covered with financial projections, market analyses, and carefully annotated news clippings about Walker Construction and its competitors. They never asked how I spent my evenings or weekends. If they had, they might have learned about my meetings with Harriet Chen, my grandmother's former lawyer and confidant. They might have discovered the visits to Thomson Industries, the manufacturing company my grandmother had built from nothing and later sold. Most of it, anyway. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," Harriet said one evening as we sat in her office overlooking the lakeside marina. "She saw things in people that others missed." I smiled, fingering the small key I always wore on a chain around my neck. She was the only one who ever saw me. It had started 3 years ago, shortly after Grandmother Eleanor's funeral. While my parents and Natalie had been occupied with the public spectacle of their grief, I had quietly helped Harriet sort through Eleanor's personal effects. In her study, locked in the bottom drawer of her antique desk, we'd found a letter, addressed to me, along with this key. "She knew you were the one," Harriet had said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The one who inherited not just her looks, but her mind for business. The letter had changed everything. "My dearest Rebecca," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm gone, but what I've built doesn't have to be. Your grandfather and I created Thomson Industries from nothing but hard work and vision. When I sold it, everyone thought I was being sentimental keeping those shares. They never understood I was investing in the future, in you." The key had opened a safe deposit box containing documents that revealed my grandmother's secret holdings. A 12% stake in Thomson Industries that no one, not even my parents, knew she had retained. And now they belonged to me. I might have been content to bide my time, slowly building my knowledge and position within the financial world while keeping my inheritance private. But then came the afternoon that changed everything. I'd stopped by my parents' house to drop off some tax documents Dad had requested. The house was quiet. I'd expected everyone to be out. Dad at the office, Mom at her social club, Natalie at whatever spa or boutique currently held her attention. But as I placed the folder on the entryway table, I heard voices from Dad's study. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Robert?" My mother's voice carried a rare note of concern. "What choice do we have, Diane? Walker Construction needs this. Capital injection to secure the Westridge development deal. It's the opportunity of a lifetime." But Rebecca's college fund? She's been talking about that MBA program for years. My breath caught. I shouldn't have been listening, but I couldn't. "Move. Rebecca is practical. She'll understand that the business takes priority. Besides, she's already got a perfectly good job. She doesn't need more education. Natalie, on the other hand, needs to make the right impression when she starts at the I. Company. The Tesla is an investment in our future." "You're right, of course," Mom sighed. "Rebecca has always been so self-sufficient, and the MBA was probably just a phase anyway. She'll get over it." I backed away silently, my heart pounding. The Westview MBA program, my dream, my carefully planned next step, casually dismissed as a phase. My $60,000 in savings, earmarked for the part of tuition my college fund wouldn't cover, now insufficient for the full amount. And all because Walker Construction needed capital for a deal that, if they'd bothered to ask me, I could have told them was overvalued and risky. By the time I reached my apartment, shock had crystallized into resolve. I called Harriet. "It's time," I said when she answered. "I'm ready to move forward with grandmother's plan." Harriet's downtown office became my war room. Together, we spread out the documents my grandmother had left, her Thomson Industries shares, detailed analyses of the company's operations, and her notes on strategic growth potential. "Eleanor always believed Thomson Industries was undervalued," Harriet explained, pointing to figures my grandmother had highlighted. "The current management is competent but conservative. They're sitting on capital that could be leveraged for strategic acquisitions." I nodded, already seeing the possibilities, particularly in sustainable building materials. The construction industry is facing increasing pressure to reduce environmental impact. Thomson could position itself at the forefront of that shift. "Exactly," Harriet smiled, a gleam of approval in her eyes. "The question is, what do you want to do with your shares? You could simply sell them, fund your MBA, and be done with it." I thought of the dismissive way my father had spoken about my educational goals, about the years I'd spent being overlooked while Natalie was groomed for a position she hadn't earned. Selling would be easy, I admitted. But grandmother didn't build this company by taking the easy path. I straightened my shoulders. "I don't just want to fund my education. I want to build something that's mine." "Like what?" "Thomson Industries has the manufacturing capacity and distribution networks. Walker Construction has the industry connections and project pipeline. Independently, they're successful. Together, they could revolutionize the regional construction market. Harriet's eyebrows rose. You're talking about a merger? Eventually, I said, a plan taking shape in my mind. But first, I need to increase my holdings in Thomson. And I need to understand exactly where Walker Construction stands financially. Your father would never willingly share that information with you. I smiled thinly. Who said anything about willingly? That evening, Marcus Patel, my colleague, from the financial firm and one of the few people who recognized my capabilities, met me for coffee. You want me to help you analyze Walker Construction's financials? He asked, his voice hushed despite the noisy cafe. Becca, that's your family's company. It's a privately held corporation that I believe may be making unsound financial decisions, I corrected. And I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Just help me interpret public records and industry data. Marcus studied me for a long moment. This is about more than professional curiosity, isn't it? I hesitated, then decided on honesty. My parents just gave my college fund to my sister. For a Tesla. A college fund that was going to help me get my MBA. His eyes widened. That's harsh. It's not the first time they've chosen her future over mine, I said, keeping my voice level. But it will be the last. Marcus nodded slowly. Okay, I'm in. But Becca, whatever you're planning, be careful. For the next 6 months, I lived 2 entirely separate lives. By day, I was Rebecca Walker, diligent financial analyst, dutiful, daughter who had maturely accepted that her educational plans needed to be temporarily shelved for the greater good of Walker Construction and Natalie's budding career. By night, I was Eleanor Thomson's granddaughter, carefully executing a strategy that would have made her proud. With Marcus's help, I compiled a comprehensive analysis of Walker Construction's financial position. What I found confirmed my suspicions. My father had over-leveraged the company, taking on too much debt to fund rapid expansion. The Westridge development was meant to be their saving grace, but the economics didn't add up. Meanwhile, I used my modest salary and every penny I could scrape together to slowly, quietly purchase additional shares in Thomson Industries through a shell company Harriet helped me establish. The process was painstaking, but by targeting small shareholders who had inherited their stakes and had little interest in the company, I managed to increase my holdings to 15% without raising alarms. Family dinners became exercises in restraint. I would sit quietly as Natalie raved about her executive training program, which consisted primarily of attending meetings where she was never expected to contribute and lunches with clients who were instructed to humor her. Natalie has such natural business instincts, Dad would boast. She reminds me of myself at that age. I would smile and compliment Natalie's Tesla, all while knowing that Walker Construction had posted its 2nd consecutive quarter of losses, and that my father had begun selling personal assets to keep up appearances. The most difficult part was maintaining my performance at the financial firm while dedicating every spare moment to my plan. There were nights I barely slept, mornings. I arrived at the office before dawn to complete my regular work so I could focus on my true goals. You're pushing yourself too hard, Marcus warned one evening as we pored over market projections in my apartment. This isn't sustainable. I gestured to the wall where I'd mapped out my timeline. It doesn't need to be sustainable. Just 3 more months. And then what? I smiled. And then everything changes. As my plan progressed, complications inevitably arose. The first came in the form of Frederick Landon, Thomson Industries' CEO, who had noticed the unusual pattern of share acquisitions and had begun an investigation to identify the buyer. He's concerned about a hostile takeover, Harriet explained, during one of our strategy sessions. He's implementing defensive measures, golden parachutes for executives, poison pill provisions. Let him, I said confidently. I'm not looking to oust management, at least not yet. The second challenge came from closer to home. One evening, I returned to my apartment to find Natalie waiting outside my door. "This is where you live?" she asked, wrinkling her nose as she followed me inside. "It's so small." "It suits my needs," I replied, discreetly moving to stand in front of my strategy wall. "What brings you here, Natalie?" She dropped onto my sofa with a dramatic sigh. "Daddy's been acting weird, stressed. He never yells, but yesterday he snapped at me over budget reports." She looked up at me with wide eyes. "You're good with money stuff. Is something wrong with the company?" For a moment, I considered telling her the truth, but the calculating look behind her concern stopped me. Natalie wasn't worried about the company or our father. She was worried about how it might affect her lifestyle. "Business has ups and downs," I said neutrally. "I'm sure Dad has everything under control." She seemed satisfied with this and quickly moved on to complaints about her assistant, who wasn't properly managing her social media presence at work. But as she was leaving, she paused at the door. "You know, Becca, you should come to the charity gala next month. All the important business people in Lakeside will be there. Maybe you could network, find a better job." She glanced around my apartment. "You could clearly use it." After she left, I leaned against the door, heart racing. The gala. I'd forgotten. It was the social event of the season, and more importantly, where Walker Construction would be courting investors for the Westridge project. I needed to be there, but not as Rebecca Walker, the overlooked daughter. I needed access to those investors, needed to understand exactly what my father was promising them. The problem was getting an invitation. The gala was exclusive, expensive, and my parents certainly wouldn't think to include me in the family party. The solution came from an unexpected source. The following week, my firm assigned me to analyze a portfolio for Jeremy Richardson, father of Natalie's date for the gala. When our meeting concluded, he mentioned the event. "Your sister seems quite excited about attending with my son," he said conversationally. I smiled politely. Natalie enjoys social occasions. "And you? Will you be attending?" I hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I wasn't invited." He looked surprised. "That's an oversight I can remedy. We always reserve a table for business associates. I'd be pleased to have you join us, Ms. Walker. Your analysis of my portfolio was most impressive." And just like that, I had my entry to the event that would accelerate my plan in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The weeks leading up to the gala were intensely focused on preparation. It wasn't enough to have shares or information. I needed to understand every aspect of both companies intimately if I was going to convince others of my vision. I spent my lunch breaks touring Thomson Industries facilities, introducing myself as a minor shareholder interested in operations. The floor managers were initially suspicious but warmed to my genuine questions and suggestions. By my third visit, they were showing me their improvement ideas that management had ignored. Evenings were dedicated to studying construction materials, innovation with Marcus, who had connections in the engineering department at Westview University. We attended lectures, read research papers, and identified the most promising technologies that a combined Thomson-Walker entity could develop. "You know more about building materials than most contractors now," Marcus observed one night as we left a presentation on carbon-negative concrete. "Your dad should be consulting you on the Westridge project." I smiled. "He will be. He just doesn't know it yet." The most valuable education, however, came from Harriet, who taught me the nuances of corporate governance, shareholder rights, and the mechanics of board meetings. "Knowledge without presentation is worthless in the business world," she told me frankly. "You need to project authority if you want to be taken seriously." We worked on my speaking voice, my posture, my ability to command attention in a room. We practiced scenarios, with Harriet playing the role of hostile board members questioning my experience and judgment. "You're too defensive," she critiqued during one particularly difficult session. "Don't justify your youth or gender. Make them justify their assumptions." I tried again, refusing to apologize for my existence, instead highlighting my qualifications with quiet confidence. Harriet's approving nod was worth more than any grade I'd ever received. The night before the gala, I visited my grandmother's grave, placing a single white rose on the headstone. "I hope I'm making you proud," I whispered to the quiet evening air. "Tomorrow, it all begins." The Lakeside Grand Hotel ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the jewels of the city's elite. I arrived alone, wearing a conservative midnight blue gown that Harriet had helped me select. Professional but elegant, designed to help me blend in with the business crowd, rather than stand out like the socialites in their showier attire. From across the room, I spotted my family. Dad looked distinguished in his tuxedo, but couldn't hide the tension in his shoulders. Mom fussed with Natalie's already perfect appearance, while my sister preened for photos with Jeremy Richardson Jr., clearly delighted to be seen with the heir to the Richardson fortune. Mr. Richardson Sr. spotted me and waved me over to his table, where I was seated beside the CEO of Lakeside National Bank and across from two major real estate developers. The conversation flowed naturally to business conditions and upcoming projects. "Walker Construction's Westridge development is the talk of the industry," one developer commented. "Ambitious project. Some might say too ambitious in the current lending environment." "Robert has always had vision," the banker replied diplomatically. "Though between us, the financing terms we've had to structure are creative." I listened carefully, asking occasional questions that revealed more than the men perhaps intended to share. It became clear that my father had staked everything on Westridge, not just the company's assets, but his personal wealth as well. Worse, he had misrepresented Walker Construction's financial health to attract investors. My stomach clenched. This wasn't just risky business, it bordered on fraud. If the project failed, it wouldn't just be the company at stake, but potentially my father's freedom. The evening's program began, and my father took the stage to present the Westridge project. His charm was on full display as he outlined a vision of luxury condominiums and retail space that would transform Lakeside's waterfront. Investors nodded appreciatively, especially when he introduced Natalie as the future of Walker Construction and invited her to join him on stage. "My daughter represents the next generation of leadership," he announced proudly. "Her fresh perspectives and innovative thinking will guide this project and our company into a new era of success." Natalie beamed, soaking in the applause while contributing nothing of substance to the presentation. I remained quiet at my table, analyzing the financial projections displayed on the screen behind them. The numbers didn't add up. The projected returns required unrealistic occupancy rates and rental prices far above market value. As the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, I excused myself and headed for the powder room, needing a moment to process what I'd learned. The stakes had just risen dramatically. My plan had been about proving myself, about creating something meaningful from my grandmother's legacy. Now it was also about preventing a disaster that could destroy both my family and the livelihoods of everyone employed by Walker Construction. In the elegant bathroom, I was washing my hands when Natalie burst in, followed by Mom. "I can't believe you're here," Natalie hissed, eyes narrowing. "Did you crash the party?" "I was invited by Mr. Richardson," I replied calmly. He was impressed with my financial analysis. "Rebecca," Mom said, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. "You should have told us you were coming." "Would you have included me in the family party if I had?" I asked quietly. Her silence was answer enough. Natalie stepped closer. "You need to leave. This is my night." Dad's introducing me to all the important people, and I don't need you hanging around making things awkward. I dried my hands carefully. I have every right to be here, Natalie. And unlike you, I actually understand the business being discussed. What's that supposed to mean? It means that while you've been playing executive, I've been learning how actual businesses operate, and Walker Construction is in trouble. Mom paled. Rebecca, you shouldn't spread rumors. It's not a rumor, Mom. The Westridge projections are fantasy. The financing is predatory. Dad's one setback away from insolvency. Natalie laughed, but it sounded hollow. You're just jealous because Dad trusts me with the company, not you. I looked at her directly. He's trusting you with a sinking ship, Natalie. You might want to learn to swim. With that, I walked past them back to the ballroom, my resolve hardened. I'd need to accelerate my timeline. The situation was more urgent than I'd realized. As I rejoined the gala, I caught sight of Frederick Landon, CEO of Thomson Industries, deep in conversation with a group of investors. It was time for an introduction. The Monday after the gala, I requested a meeting with my boss at the financial firm. I need a leave of absence, I explained, placing a formal letter on his desk. Family business requires my full attention. He looked concerned. This is rather sudden, Rebecca. Does it have anything to do with your analysis of Thomson Industries? The partners noticed you've been particularly thorough in your research. I maintained a neutral expression. I'm simply being diligent. Thomson is an important regional employer. He studied me for a moment. Very well. Your work has been exemplary. The leave is approved, but we'd like you back within 3 months if possible. That should be more than sufficient, I assured him. The next 3 weeks were a carefully orchestrated campaign. With Harriet's guidance, I arranged meetings with Thomson's major shareholders, presenting myself as Eleanor Thomson's granddaughter with a vision for the company's growth. My financial background and detailed knowledge of the industry impressed most. My grandmother's name opened doors with the old guard who remembered her leadership fondly. Eleanor always said the company should stay ahead of trends, not chase them, I told a group of longtime shareholders over lunch. She would see the shift towards sustainable building materials as an opportunity, not a threat. By the end of the second week, I had secured informal support from shareholders representing another 20% of the company. Combined with my own holdings, I now had influence over 35%, not a majority, but enough to gain serious attention from the board. Frederick Landon finally requested a meeting. Ms. Walker, he began, studying me across his imposing desk at Thomson headquarters. You've been busy. I've been concerned with Thomson's future, I corrected politely, as my grandmother was. Eleanor was a remarkable woman, he acknowledged, but times have changed. The strategy you've been discussing with our shareholders, vertical integration, into construction, sustainable materials development, requires capital and risk we're not prepared to take on. That's where you're wrong, I said, sliding a folder across his desk. This contains my analysis of the market opportunity, capital, requirements, and projected returns. It also includes a brief overview of Walker Construction's current projects and financial position. His eyebrows rose as he skimmed the contents. How did you obtain this information about Walker Construction? It's my family's company, I replied simply, and it's facing challenges that make it both vulnerable and valuable to Thomson. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're proposing an acquisition. I'm proposing a strategic combination that benefits both companies. Walker has the projects and industry connections but needs financial stability and materials innovation. Thomson has the manufacturing capacity and balance sheet strength but needs growth avenues. Landon leaned back, reassessing me. Your father is aware of this proposal? He will be, I said with confidence I didn't entirely feel. A formal presentation to both boards is scheduled for next Friday. I'd appreciate your support, Mr. Landon, but I'll be moving forward regardless. After he agreed to consider the proposal, I made my final preparations. Marcus helped me refine the financial models while Harriet coached me on handling potential objections. I rehearsed my presentation until I could deliver it in my sleep, anticipating every possible question or challenge. The night before the board meeting, I received an unexpected call from my mother. "Rebecca," she sounded agitated. "Your father, he's not well. The bank called today about the Westridge financing. Something about covenant violations." Her voice lowered. "He's talking about remortgaging the house again. I'm worried." My heart raced. "Mom, tell him not to sign anything. I'm handling it." "Handling what? Rebecca, what are you involved in?" "Trust me," I said firmly. "For once, just trust that I know what I'm doing." The next morning, I dressed with deliberate care in a charcoal suit that echoed my grandmother's signature style, fastening her pearl earrings as a final touch. As I prepared to leave my apartment, I received a text from Harriet. "Thomson board. Room, 10 a.m. Both boards confirmed. Your parents have been notified." It was time. The Thomson Industries boardroom fell silent as I entered. 20 faces turned toward me, expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. The long mahogany table was divided like opposing armies. Thomson executives and board members on one side, Walker Construction's leadership team on the other. My father sat at the head of the Walker contingent, his face ashen. Beside him, my mother looked confused and anxious. Natalie, surprisingly present, appeared completely bewildered. "What is the meaning of this?" my father demanded as I took my place at the podium. "I received a summons to an emergency joint board meeting about the future of Walker Construction. Why are you here?" Frederick Landon cleared his throat. "Mr. Walker, your daughter has presented a proposal that affects both our companies. As a significant shareholder in Thomson Industries, she has the right to address the board." "Shareholder?" Dad's confusion was evident. "That's impossible." I met his gaze steadily. "Nothing is impossible with proper planning, Dad. Something grandmother Eleanor taught me, since no one else would." I turned to address the full room, activating the presentation I had prepared. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time today. I've asked you here because both Thomson Industries and Walker Construction stand at a critical juncture. Independently, each faces significant challenges in a changing market. Together, they represent an extraordinary opportunity. For the next 30 minutes, I presented my vision with calm authority. I outlined Thomson's manufacturing strengths and financial stability alongside its growth limitations. I detailed Walker's project pipeline and market presence while unflinchingly addressing its precarious financial position. "The Westridge development," I explained, pulling up the project plans, "represents both Walker Construction's greatest potential and its greatest vulnerability. As currently structured, the financing terms are unsustainable. However, with Thomson's balance sheet strength and manufacturing capabilities, the project could be reconfigured as a showcase for sustainable building technologies with significantly improved margins." Throughout my presentation, my father's expression shifted from shock to anger to reluctant attention as the business case became clear. The Thomson board members were nodding with increasing interest, particularly when I presented the financial projections. In summary, I concluded, I am proposing a merger of equals that preserves the legacy of both companies while creating a vertically integrated enterprise uniquely positioned for the future of construction. The combined entity would maintain both the Thomson and Walker names, honoring the families that built these companies. As I finished, Frederick Landon was the first to speak. "This is an intriguing proposal, Ms. Walker, but I have one fundamental question. You've presented yourself as a Thomson shareholder with sufficient standing to initiate these discussions. Can you clarify exactly what your position is?" The Moment had come. I nodded to Harriet, who distributed folders to each board member. Upon my grandmother Eleanor Thomson's death, I inherited her 12% stake in Thomson Industries, I began. Over the past year, I have acquired additional shares through open market purchases. As of yesterday, I control 35% of Thomson Industries' outstanding shares, making me the largest individual shareholder. The room erupted in murmurs. My father stared at me in disbelief. That's not possible, he stammered. Eleanor sold her entire stake when she retired. Officially, yes, I agreed. But grandmother kept a significant portion through various holding companies. She always believed in maintaining influence over what she built. I allowed myself a small smile. Another lesson she taught me. Natalie suddenly found her voice. This is ridiculous. She's making this up. Daddy, tell them she's lying. But my father was already reviewing the documentation Harriet had provided, his face growing paler with each page. It appears to be in order, he said finally, his voice hollow. But Rebecca, why? Why go behind our backs like this? Would you have listened if I'd come to you directly? I asked quietly. When have you ever valued my input on business matters? When have you ever seen me as anything but the practical daughter who would eventually settle down while Natalie took over the company? Mom looked stricken. That's not fair, Rebecca. Isn't it? I turned to her. You gave my college fund to Natalie for a Tesla, a fund that was meant for my MBA. You dismissed my education as a phase while you handed her an executive position she didn't earn. We needed the liquidity for the business, Dad defended weakly. The Westridge project is financially unsound as currently structured, I finished for him. You've over-leveraged the company, Dad. You're 3 missed payments away from losing everything. This merger isn't just an opportunity, it's a rescue. The Thomson board members were watching this family drama unfold with varying degrees of discomfort and interest. Finally, their lead director cleared his throat. Perhaps we should take a brief recess to consider the proposal's merits separately, he suggested. It seems there are personal matters to be resolved as well. As the Thomson team filed out, leaving the Walker family alone in the boardroom, Natalie turned on me furiously. How dare you embarrass us like this? You think you can just waltz in here and take over? I'm the one Dad's been preparing to lead the company. Preparing how exactly? I asked calmly. By giving you a title? By shielding you from actual responsibility? The real world doesn't work that way, Natalie. Enough, Dad said sharply, looking suddenly old. Rebecca, is what you said true about our financial position? I nodded, softening slightly at his evident distress. The Westridge financing is predatory, Dad. The terms virtually guarantee default unless you hit unrealistic occupancy projections. I'm offering a legitimate solution that preserves the company and your legacy. He stared at the proposal for a long moment. And your position at Thomson? You actually control 35%? Yes, with the support I've already secured from other shareholders. My recommendation carries significant weight. A complex mixture of emotions crossed his face. Pride, regret, and something that might have been respect. You really are your grandmother's granddaughter, he said finally. It was the first genuine compliment he'd ever given me. The revelation moment. When the boards reconvened an hour later, the atmosphere had shifted. The Thomson directors had clearly discussed my proposal in depth, while the Walker team, led by my father, had moved from shock to strategic consideration. Frederick Landon spoke first. Ms. Walker, the Thomson board is prepared to move forward with due diligence on the proposed merger, subject to standard conditions and shareholder approval. We believe the strategic rationale is sound. All eyes turned to my father. He straightened in his chair, summoning the business acumen that had built Walker Construction before recent missteps. The Walker Board will require certain assurances regarding the preservation of our brand and the future of our employees, he said carefully. However, in principle, we see merit in this combination. Relief washed through me, though I maintained my professional demeanor. I'm pleased to hear that. I believe a transition committee with representatives from both companies would be the appropriate next step. Agreed, Landon nodded. And the leadership of the combined entity? Your proposal mentioned co-CEOs during a transition period? This was the moment I had carefully planned for, the culmination of everything I had worked toward. Yes, I confirmed. I propose that Mr. Landon continue as CEO of the manufacturing division, while Mr. Walker leads the construction operations. After a 2-year integration period, a permanent leadership structure would be determined by the new board. There was a visible relaxation of tension in the room. I hadn't come to oust either executive, merely to create a sustainable future for both companies. And your role in all this? One of the Thomson directors asked. I smiled. I'll be pursuing my MBA at Westview, as originally planned. With the board's approval, I would like to chair the Strategic Planning Committee during the transition, focusing particularly on sustainable building technologies. My father looked up sharply. The MBA program? That's still what you want? It always was, I said simply. I want to earn my place in this new company, not have it handed to me. The meeting continued with discussion of next steps, formation of working groups, and timeline for shareholder votes. As details were finalized, I caught Natalie watching me with an unreadable expression. Not quite anger anymore, but something more complex. As the meeting concluded, both boards filed out with a newfound sense of purpose and direction. The merger wasn't just a bailout for Walker Construction, it was genuinely exciting from a business perspective, opening new markets and creating efficiencies that neither company could achieve alone. I watched as Frederick Landon shook my father's hand, their previous competitive tension giving way to cautious optimism about their shared future. A word, Rebecca? My father hung back as the room emptied, gesturing to the chairs we'd just vacated. I nodded, taking a seat across from him. For a moment, he simply looked at me, as if seeing me clearly for the first time. How long have you been planning this? He asked finally. The specific merger? About 6 months, I admitted. But building my position in Thomson, that started 3 years ago, after grandmother's funeral. He shook his head slowly. I had no idea. None of us did. You never asked, I said simply. About my interests, my goals, my work, any of it. A flash of defensiveness crossed his face, then faded into something like resignation. I've made mistakes, Rebecca, with the company, with you. Yes, I agreed, not unkindly. You have. The MBA, he continued. Even after we repurposed your college fund, you could have come to me, explained how important it was to you. I raised an eyebrow. Would you have listened? Or would you have told me that Natalie's needs took priority, as you always have? He flinched slightly, but didn't deny it. I thought I was doing what was best for the company, grooming my successor. Based on what? Her qualifications? Her interest in the business? Or just because she was your favorite? His silence was answer enough. Dad, I don't want to take Natalie's place, I said, softening my tone. I've never wanted to be handed anything. I want to earn my position, build something meaningful on my own merits. That's what this has always been about. Your grandmother knew, he said suddenly. She saw in you what I missed. The business, mind, the strategic thinking. He smiled sadly. She and I didn't always see eye to eye. Perhaps that's why I didn't see the resemblance between you two. Before I could respond, the door opened and my mother appeared, her expression a mixture of concern and confusion. Robert, the Thomson people are asking about next steps. She glanced between us, clearly sensing the weight of our conversation. We'll be right there, my father assured her. As she retreated, he turned back to me. We have a lot more to discuss, Rebecca. About the company, about your role, about our family. He extended his hand formally. But for now, congratulations. On an impressive presentation. It seems I've underestimated you for the last time. I accepted his handshake, trying to ignore the unexpected lump in my throat. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. For now, that was enough. The confrontation, the weeks following the board meeting were filled with intense activity. Due diligence teams from both companies worked around the clock to verify financials, assess operational synergies, and draft formal merger documentation. I divided my time between coordinating with Harriet on legal matters and working with Marcus to develop the sustainable materials initiative that would become the cornerstone of the combined company's strategy. I had expected my family to give me space after the revelation, perhaps to process what had happened and adjust to the new reality. Instead, on a rainy Tuesday evening 3 weeks after the board meeting, I opened my apartment door to find Natalie standing there, soaking wet and visibly agitated. "We need to talk," she announced, pushing past me into my apartment. "Come in," I said dryly, closing the door behind her. Natalie paced my small living room, water dripping from her designer coat onto my hardwood floor. She looked around, taking in the maps and charts that still covered my walls, the stacks of industry reports on my coffee table. Her eyes widened, slightly as she absorbed the visible evidence of my long-term planning. "How long have you been living like this?" she asked, gesturing to my work materials. "Like what? Focused? Driven? Planning for my future?" "Like a conspiracy theorist," she shot back. "All these secret plans, hiding things from your family. It's not normal, Becca." I sighed, hanging up my own coat. "What do you want, Natalie? If you're here to complain about the merger—" "I'm not," she interrupted, surprising me. "Actually, I've been sitting in on some of the integration meetings. It makes sense. The merger, I mean. From a business perspective." Now she really had my attention. "You've been attending the meetings?" She nodded, a hint of defiance in her expression. "Dad insisted. Said if I was going to be part of the company, I needed to understand what was happening." She dropped onto my sofa, suddenly looking deflated. I didn't understand most of it at first, all the financial terms, the operational jargon. But I've been studying, asking questions. I leaned against my desk, watching her carefully. This wasn't the entitled sister I was used to dealing with. That's good. Is it? She looked up at me, her expression unexpectedly vulnerable. "Because what I'm realizing is that I know nothing, Becca. Nothing about running a business. Nothing about construction. I've been playing dress-up in an executive office while you've been actually learning, actually working." Her voice cracked slightly. "Dad set me up to fail, didn't he?" The rawness of her question caught me off guard. For years, I had resented Natalie's privileges, her unearned advantages. I had never considered that those same advantages might be a burden in their own way, setting expectations she wasn't equipped to meet. "He wanted to give you opportunities," I said carefully. "But yes, putting you in a leadership position without proper training or experience wasn't doing you any favors." She laughed bitterly. "The Tesla, the executive office, the director of special projects title. All of it was just, what? Keeping me distracted with shiny objects?" "I think," I said slowly, "that Dad has always found it easier to give you things than to challenge you. And Mom has always enabled that dynamic." Natalie was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Why didn't you ever say anything? About your shares in Thomson? About your plans? Would you have listened?" I countered. "Or would you have run straight to Dad to warn him that I was plotting something?" She had the grace to look embarrassed. "Probably the second one. she admitted. We've never really been on the same side, have we? We've never been allowed to be, I corrected. Not when everything between us was a competition that I wasn't permitted to win. Natalie stood suddenly, moving to examine the project timeline, pinned to my wall. All this time, I thought you were the boring one, the safe one. I used to feel sorry for you. She turned to face me. But you were building something real, weren't you? While I was just playing pretend. The vulnerability in her voice disarmed me. For the first time since we were very young children, I felt a flicker of genuine connection with my sister. Not competition, not resentment, just honesty. It's not too late, you know, I said. To learn, to contribute meaningfully to the company. How? She asked bluntly. I have a communications degree I barely earned and no actual skills. You're good with people, I pointed out. You understand social dynamics, relationship building. That's valuable in business, especially in client-facing roles. She seemed surprised by my assessment. You think so? I wouldn't say it if I didn't. I hesitated, then added, the merger's going to create a need for cohesive branding, unified corporate communications. It's a perfect opportunity for someone with your background to make a real contribution, if you're willing to start at an appropriate level and work your way up. Natalie was quiet for a long moment, considering this. I'd have to report to someone else. Take direction. Actually learn the business from the ground up. Yes, I confirmed. Just like everyone else does. Like you did. I nodded. No shortcuts, no special treatment. Just hard work and merit. She sank back down, onto the sofa, looking thoughtful. I don't know if I can do that, Becca. I've never had to really earn anything before. Then maybe it's time to find out if you can. We sat in silence for a while, the rain tapping against my windows providing a gentle backdrop to this unexpected moment of reckoning between us. Finally, Natalie stood, gathering her still damp coat. I should go. It's getting late. I walked her to the door, still uncertain where we stood. At the threshold, she paused. That day, she said softly, when Mom and Dad gave me your college, fund for the Tesla, I knew it was wrong. I could see it in Mom's eyes, the way she couldn't quite look at you. She swallowed hard, but I took it anyway, because I wanted the car, and because that's what I was used to. Getting what I wanted, regardless of who it hurt. I said nothing, waiting. I'm sorry, Becca, she finished, meeting my eyes directly. I really am. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. It didn't erase years of favoritism or undo the hurt of being perpetually overlooked. But as I watched her walk away down the hallway, I felt something shift between us. A first step, perhaps, toward a different kind of relationship. The confrontation I had expected, the angry accusations and tearful recriminations, hadn't materialized. Instead, something more valuable had emerged, the beginning of understanding. 2 days later, I received an unexpected email from Natalie. The subject line read simply, "My resignation letter, draft for your review." The attached document was her formal resignation as Director of Special Projects at Walker Construction, effective immediately, with a request to be considered for an entry-level position in the corporate communications department of the merged company, based solely on my qualifications and subject to standard hiring procedures. I stared at the screen, a complex mixture of emotions washing over me. It was more than I had expected from her, a public acknowledgement that she needed to earn her place rather than have it handed to her. I composed a brief reply. This is a good first step. I'll make sure it gets to the right people. Her response came minutes later. Thank you for not saying I told you so. I smiled slightly as I typed. I'm saving that for when you complain about your first performance review. For the first time in our adult lives, I felt like we were having a real conversation. The confrontation with my parents came a week later, in a very different context. My father had invited me to dinner at their home, the first such invitation since the board meeting. I arrived prepared for tension, for difficult questions, perhaps even for anger. What I hadn't expected was the sight of my mother waiting alone. In the living room, my father nowhere to be seen. Dad had to take an urgent call with the Thomson team, she explained, her hands fidgeting with her necklace, a nervous habit I recognized from childhood. He'll join us as soon as he can. I nodded, settling into a chair across from her. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. "Would you like something to drink?" she offered finally. "I'm fine, thank you." I looked around the familiar room, seeing it with new eyes. The carefully curated family photos that featured Natalie prominently, while I appeared mainly in group shots. The display cabinet showcasing Natalie's participation trophies alongside Dad's business awards. The subtle but pervasive evidence of where priorities had always lain in this household. "This is awkward, isn't it?" My mother's voice pulled me from my observations. "Having you here, after everything that's happened? It doesn't have to be," I said quietly. "We could try being honest with each other for once." She flinched, slightly. "I've never lied to you, Rebecca." "No, but you've participated in a family dynamic that consistently devalued me and my contributions. That's its own kind of dishonesty." Mom's eyes widened at my directness. For a moment, I thought she might retreat into defensiveness or denial. Instead, she sighed deeply, her shoulders sagging. "You're right," she admitted, the words seeming to cost her. "I've always found it easier to go along with your father's decisions, to support his vision for the family. Even when that meant..." She trailed off. "Even when that meant allowing me to be treated as an afterthought," I finished for her. She nodded, looking genuinely pained. "I told myself it was because you were so independent, so self-sufficient, that you didn't need the same attention Natalie did. Everyone needs to be valued, Mom. Everyone needs to be seen." "I know that," she said softly. I forgot it somewhere along the way." She looked up at me, tears forming in her eyes. "When did you become so strong, Rebecca? When did you learn to stand up for yourself like this?" "When I realized no one else was going to do it for me," I answered honestly. Before she could respond, the front door opened and my father strode, in his expression distracted. "Sorry for the delay," he said, tossing his car keys onto the side table. The integration team had questions about the Westridge contracts. He paused, looking between us. "Did I interrupt something?" "Just some long overdue honesty," I said, rising to my feet. "Shall we continue over dinner?" The meal was tense. At first, as we navigated this new territory where I was no longer the compliant, overlooked daughter, but a business equal with significant influence over my father's company's future. Gradually, though, as we discussed the merger progress, my father's demeanor shifted from guarded to genuinely engaged. "The sustainability initiative you proposed," he said, refilling his water glass. "It's actually quite brilliant. The Thomson team ran the numbers, and the projected ROI is impressive, especially with the tax incentives for green building materials." "I know," I replied calmly. "That's why I proposed it." He smiled slightly. "Yes? I suppose you did the math before?" Presenting it. "I did the math, the market research, the competitive analysis, and the regulatory compliance review," I corrected. "I don't propose half-baked ideas, Dad." "No," he acknowledged. "You certainly don't." As dessert was served, my mother tentatively broached the subject we'd all been circling. Natalie told us about her resignation, about asking for an entry-level position. She glanced at my father before continuing. It was quite a shock. "She made a mature decision," I said. "One that will serve her better in the long run than continuing in a role she wasn't prepared for." "She said it was your idea." My father interjected, his tone neutral. I suggested it as an option, I corrected. The decision was hers. He nodded slowly. It's the first time she's made a career choice without asking for my approval or intervention. He sounded almost proud, which surprised me. She's also asked me for book recommendations, business basics, financial literacy. She's never shown interest in those things before. I set down my fork, studying him. People can surprise you if you give them the chance. If you set appropriate expectations instead of protecting them from consequences. Is that what you think I did? Protected her from consequences. I think, I said carefully, that you tried to make her path smoother than it needed to be. And in doing so, you denied her the opportunity to develop resilience, to learn from mistakes, to earn genuine confidence in her abilities. My father was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this. And you? Did I make your path too difficult by comparison? It was the question I'd been waiting for, the acknowledgement of the imbalance that had shaped our family dynamic for so long. I took a deep breath, considering my answer. You didn't make it difficult, Dad. You made it invisible. You simply didn't see me working my way through community college, transferring to state, graduating with honors. You didn't notice when I was promoted at the financial firm, when I started building my investment portfolio, when I began studying Thomson Industries. I was succeeding, but it didn't register because you weren't looking in my direction. My mother made a small, pained sound. My father's expression was complex. Regret mingled with something that might have been pride. I'm looking now, he said quietly, and I'm impressed by what I see. He hesitated, then added, Your grandmother would be proud. I know, I said simply. She told me she was before she died. Something shifted in my father's expression. She knew what you were planning? With her shares? I nodded. Not the specific merger, but she knew I would find a way to make something meaningful from what she left me. She believed in me even when no one else in this family did. A heavy silence descended over the table. Finally, my mother spoke, her voice trembling slightly. We've failed you, Rebecca. I can see that now. She reached tentatively across the table, not quite touching my hand, but extending the gesture nonetheless. I don't know if you can forgive us, but I hope. I hope we can find a way forward. I looked between them, my father, struggling with the realization that he had misjudged both his daughters in different ways. My mother, finally acknowledging her role in the family's dysfunctional dynamic. There was a long road ahead if we were to rebuild these relationships on healthier terms. But for the first time, I felt that it might be possible. The merger will be finalized next month, I said finally. After that, I start at Westview. My life is going to be very busy for a while. I met each of their gazes directly, but perhaps we could have dinner once a month. Start there. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was an opening, a chance for something new to grow in place of old patterns and resentments. My father nodded solemnly. We'd like that. As I drove home that night, I reflected on these unexpected confrontations with Natalie, with my parents, that had unfolded so differently than I had anticipated. There had been no shouting, no dramatic recriminations. Instead, there had been something more valuable, the beginning of honest communication, of seeing and being seen. The true confrontation, I realized, hadn't been with my family at all. It had been with the patterns that had defined us for so long, the favoritism, the dismissal, the unearned privileges and overlooked accomplishments. Those patterns had been confronted and found wanting. Now we all had the chance to create something better. The new equilibrium. The formal announcement of the Thomson-Walker merger made front-page business news across the region. Family companies unite. Historic merger creates construction powerhouse. read the Lakeside Chronicle's headline. The accompanying article detailed the strategic rationale, the leadership structure, and the innovative sustainable building materials initiative that would differentiate the combined company in the marketplace. What it didn't mention, what only those closest to the situation understood, was how fundamentally the power dynamics had shifted within the Walker family as a result. The day after the announcement, I sat in Harriet's office, reviewing the final legal documents before the official closing. "You've accomplished something remarkable, Rebecca," she said, leaning back in her chair with evident satisfaction. "Not just the merger itself, but how you've managed to reshape your family relationships in the process." I smiled slightly. That part wasn't in the original plan. Wasn't it? Her shrewd eyes studied me. "You could have simply sold your Thomson shares, funded your education, and walked away from Walker Construction entirely. There were simpler paths to your MBA than orchestrating a complex merger." She had a point. As much as I had told myself this was purely about business, about creating something meaningful from my grandmother's legacy, there had always been another dimension to it. I had wanted recognition, not just from the business community, but from my family. I had wanted them to see me, to acknowledge my capabilities, to value my contributions. Perhaps I had multiple objectives, I conceded. Harriet smiled knowingly. "As your grandmother often said, the smartest solutions solve more than one problem at once." She closed the folder before her. "Speaking of Eleanor, there's something she asked me to give you once the merger was completed." She reached into her desk drawer and withdrew a small wrapped package. "She left this in my keeping, with specific instructions about when you should receive it." I accepted the package with trembling hands. She knew? Even then, she anticipated. "This?" "Eleanor was always playing the long game," Harriet said gently, "just like someone else I know." Alone in my apartment that evening, I carefully unwrapped the package to find a small, leather-bound journal, its pages filled with my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. A letter was tucked inside the front cover. "My dearest Rebecca," it began. "If you're reading this, then you've begun to realize your potential in ways your parents never anticipated. I recognized the spark in you from an early age, the same determination, the same strategic mind that helped me build Thomson Industries when everyone said a woman couldn't succeed in manufacturing." Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. "This journal contains my thoughts on leadership, on building something meaningful, on navigating a business world that may not always recognize your worth immediately. I hope it provides guidance as you forge your own path. The shares I've left you are a starting point, not a destination. What you build with them will be entirely your own achievement." The letter concluded with words that lodged deep in my heart. "You've never needed to be the favorite to be exceptional. Remember that as you move forward, with love and absolute confidence in your abilities, Grandmother Eleanor." I spent hours that night reading her journal, absorbing her wisdom, feeling a connection to her that transcended her physical absence. In her words, I found validation of choices I had already made and insight for challenges still to come. The next morning brought my first day as chair of the Strategic Planning Committee for Thomson Walker Incorporated. The company's headquarters, formerly Thomson Industries' main building, had been subtly rebranded with the new combined logo. As I walked through the lobby, I noticed employees from both legacy companies mingling, exchanging ideas, beginning to form a unified culture. My father was already in the conference room when I arrived, reviewing documents with Frederick Landon. They both stood as I entered. "Rebecca," my father greeted me with newfound respect. "We were just discussing the rollout plan for the sustainability initiative. Your market entry strategy is impressively thorough." "Thank you," I said, setting down my briefcase. "I've been working with the R&D teams from both sides to refine the technical specifications." Landon nodded approvingly. "It shows. This could position us as a genuine innovator in the space." The meeting proceeded with a level of collaboration I found encouraging. My father, stripped of his absolute authority but secure in his role, leading the construction division, seemed more engaged with the details than I had ever seen him. He asked thoughtful questions, offered valuable insights from his decades of industry experience, and, most surprisingly, deferred to others. Expertise when appropriate. When Natalie arrived halfway through the meeting, I was struck by the transformation in her demeanor. Gone were the designer clothes and casual confidence. Instead, she wore a professional but understated outfit and carried a notebook filled with careful annotations. She took a seat at the far end of the table, not expecting special treatment, prepared to observe and learn. During a break, she approached me by the coffee station. "Is it always this detailed?" she asked quietly. "All these operational discussions, financial projections." "This is actually the simplified version," I told her with a small smile. "Wait until you see the full technical specifications for the new materials." She looked momentarily overwhelmed, then squared her shoulders. "I've been reading those business books Dad recommended. Some of it is starting to make sense." "Good," I said sincerely. "Keep at it. Understanding takes time." She hesitated, then asked, "Do you think I could sit in on the marketing subcommittee meetings? Not to participate yet, just to learn the process." "I think that would be appropriate," I agreed. "I'll speak to the committee chair." A tentative smile crossed her face. "Thanks, Becca." As the meeting resumed, I watched my father and sister from my position at the table, both finding their way in this new reality, both adjusting to merit-based expectations rather than family-based entitlement. The transformation wasn't complete, might never be complete, but it had begun. In the weeks that followed, a new equilibrium gradually established itself, both within the company and within our family. My father, freed from the financial pressures that had driven his recent poor decisions, returned to what he did best: building relationships with clients and overseeing complex construction projects. Landon, secure in his role leading the manufacturing division, embraced the innovative direction we were pursuing. My mother, perhaps the most surprising transformation, began volunteering with a women's business mentorship program, inspired, she told me, by recognizing how I failed to advocate for your potential. It was a small step, but a meaningful one. Natalie struggled initially with her entry-level position, unaccustomed to taking direction rather than giving it. There were tearful phone calls, moments of frustration, even a brief period where she considered quitting. But gradually, as she began to master genuine skills and receive earned recognition, a new confidence emerged, one built on accomplishment rather than entitlement. As for me, the start of my MBA program at Westview coincided with the 100-day mark of the merger. My schedule was demanding, divided between my studies and my role chairing the strategic planning committee. But for the first time in my life, I felt fully engaged with work that challenged and fulfilled me, surrounded by people who recognized my contributions. The Sustainable Building Materials Initiative launched on schedule, garnering industry attention, and positioning Thomson Walker as an innovator in the space. My grandmother's journal had contained insights about market timing and positioning that proved prescient, guiding decisions that gave us a competitive edge. 6 months after the merger, the company hosted a reception to celebrate its early successes. Standing in the elegantly decorated atrium of headquarters, watching employees from both legacy companies mingling comfortably, I felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond professional accomplishment. My father approached, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "For you," he said, offering one to me. "You don't normally drink at company functions, I know, but I thought tonight warranted an exception." I accepted the glass. "Thank you." He gestured around the room. All of this, the merger, the new direction, the Sustainable Materials Initiative, it's transforming both companies in ways I never imagined. He hesitated, then added quietly, just as you've transformed our family." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that a good thing?" "It wasn't easy," he admitted. "Change never is. But looking at what we're building now, at the company, at how Natalie is growing into her capabilities, at how your mother and I are relating to both of you differently, yes, I believe it's a very good thing." Across the room, I spotted Natalie deep in conversation with the marketing director, animatedly discussing something on her tablet. She caught my eye and gave a small, genuine smile. No longer the practiced charm she had once relied on, but something more authentic. "She's finding her way," my father observed, following my gaze. "On her own terms," I agreed. "With appropriate support and realistic expectations." He nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about something you said, about how I tried to make her path too smooth." He sipped his champagne. "I did the same with the company, avoided difficult decisions, took shortcuts, relied on charm and connections rather than sound strategy. And now? Now I'm learning to do the hard work," he said simply. "To make decisions based on merit rather than preference. To build something sustainable rather than expedient." He turned to face me directly. "I had good teachers in that regard." Before I could respond, Frederick Landon called for attention, raising his glass in a toast to the successful integration of the two companies. As applause filled the room, I felt a tap on my shoulder and turned to find Harriet beside me. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said softly, nodding toward the new Thomson Walker logo prominently displayed above the reception area. "Not just of what you've built, but of how you built it." I fingered the small key I still wore around my neck, the one that had unlocked not just a safe deposit box, but a future I had scarcely dared to imagine. I had a good foundation to build on. "Indeed," she agreed, "but the structure is entirely your own." As the evening wound down, I found myself on the building's rooftop terrace, taking a moment of quiet amid the celebration. The city lights spread out before me, lakeside living up to its name with the water reflecting countless pinpoints of brightness. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Congratulations on the successful launch. Professor Wilson was impressed by your sustainable materials presentation today. Said he'd never had an MBA student with such practical industry knowledge." I smiled, texting back a quick thanks. My dual life as student and strategic committee chair was demanding but fulfilling in ways I had always hoped my career would be. I was learning, contributing, building something meaningful, all on my own merits. A soft footfall behind me announced my mother's arrival. She joined me at the railing, gazing out at the city view. "It's beautiful up here," she said after a moment. "I've never been to this part of the building before." "Grandmother used to come here to think," I told her. "She mentioned it in her journal." Mom nodded slowly. "She was always strategic, that way. Finding perspective." She turned to study my profile. "You remind me of her more and more." Coming from her, it was perhaps the highest compliment she could offer. We stood in companionable silence for a while, a rare moment of peace between us. "I made so many mistakes with you, Rebecca," she said finally. "I let your father's focus on Natalie become the family's focus. I didn't protect your interests or nurture your gifts." "Why?" I asked simply. It was a question I'd wanted to ask for years. She considered this carefully before answering. "I think I saw too much of myself in you. The practical one. The one who didn't need constant attention." She sighed. "I was that daughter in my family too, The responsible one while my sister got all the focus." This was news to me. My mother rarely spoke about her childhood. "What happened?" "I accepted it," she said with a shrug. "I built my life around being the supportive one, the practical one. I married your father, helped him build his business, raised his children." She turned to me, eyes suddenly clear and direct. But you chose a different path. You refused to accept being overlooked. You built something of your own. A small, sad smile. You're braver than I ever was. The admission hung between us, honest in a way our relationship had rarely been. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I simply acknowledged the truth of it. I couldn't accept it, not and still respect myself. I'm glad, she said softly. And I'm proud of you, Rebecca. I should have said that long ago. As we returned to the reception, I felt something shift in our relationship. Not forgiveness. Exactly, but understanding. A new equilibrium forming between us, as it was throughout our family. The justice served reflection. A year after the merger, I stood at the podium in Thomson Walker's largest conference room, presenting the annual results to the board and executive team. The company had exceeded all integration targets, with the Sustainable Materials division growing faster than projected, and overall profitability up 22% from the combined baseline of the separate companies. The Westridge development, I concluded, clicking to the final slide, has been completely redesigned as a showcase for our sustainable building technologies. Construction begins next quarter, with pre-sales already exceeding expectations. Applause filled the room as I took my seat. My father, co-CEO of the construction division, nodded appreciatively from across the table. Frederick Landon, his manufacturing counterpart, leaned over to whisper, "Eleanor would have loved this." As the meeting adjourned, board members stopped to congratulate me on both the presentation and my recent completion of the first year of my MBA program with top honors. The dual challenges of graduate education and my role on the strategic planning committee had been demanding but deeply satisfying. Natalie was waiting outside the boardroom, laptop in hand, ready for her scheduled meeting with the marketing team. Her entry-level position had evolved into a genuine role managing social media communications for the Sustainable Materials launch. She had surprised everyone, perhaps herself most of all, with her dedication to learning the business properly. "How did it go?" she asked as I exited. "Very well," I replied. "The board approved all the strategic initiatives for next year." She nodded, looking pleased but also slightly nervous. "I'm presenting the communications plan for the Westridge launch today. My first solo presentation to the executive team." "You'll do fine," I assured her. "You've done the work." Her smile held a new confidence, not the artificial bravado of the past, but something earned through effort and accomplishment. "Thanks, Becca." As I watched her enter the meeting room, prepared and professional, I reflected on the transformation in our relationship over the past year. We would never be best friends. Too much history lay between us for that. But we had found a way to respect each other's strengths and contributions. She no longer resented my capabilities, and I no longer begrudged her natural charisma. We had each found our own path within the company. My father emerged from the boardroom, still discussing details with Landon. Seeing me, he excused himself and approached. "I'm heading over to the Westridge site," he said. "Want to join me? I'd value your perspective on the modifications to the sustainability features." A year ago, such an invitation would have been unthinkable. Now it felt natural, a professional courtesy between colleagues who respected each other's expertise. "I'd like that," I agreed. The drive to the construction site gave us time to discuss business matters, our conversation flowing easily between technical details and strategic considerations. My father had flourished in his more focused role, freed from the financial pressures that had driven him to poor decisions. He had become a mentor to me in understanding the construction industry's complexities, while I brought financial and strategic rigor to our discussions. As we walked the Westridge property, hard hats in place, he pointed out the areas where our new sustainable materials would be showcased. "The redesign is actually superior to the original concept," he admitted, surveying the site with a professional, better flow, more functional space, and the energy efficiency metrics will attract a premium market segment. And the financing terms are considerably more favorable, I added. The sustainability focus qualified us for the municipal green building incentives. He nodded appreciatively. You saw the potential before any of us. I had good information, and the freedom to analyze it objectively, I said. Something grandmother taught me. Emotion has no place in business decisions. He was quiet for a moment, seemingly lost in thought. You know, your grandmother and I had a complicated relationship, he said finally. I think she saw in me what I saw in Natalie, someone who relied too much on charm and not enough on substance. A rueful smile. She wasn't wrong. She respected you, I countered. She mentioned that in her journal. She just thought you took unnecessary risks. Like the original Westridge plan, he acknowledged. If you hadn't stepped in with the merger, with this new direction. He let the thought hang unfinished. We both knew what would have happened. Walker Construction would have defaulted on its loans. The family's financial stability, my father's reputation, the livelihoods of hundreds of employees, all would have been jeopardized. Instead, we stood on the brink of the company's most innovative project to date, its future secure. It worked out better for everyone this way, I said simply. On the drive back to headquarters, my father broached a subject we had carefully avoided in our professional interactions. Your mother mentioned you might join us for dinner this weekend. Natalie will be there with her new boyfriend, some tech entrepreneur she met at a sustainable building conference, if you can believe it. I smiled at the irony. A year ago, Natalie had been dating Jeremy Richardson Jr. solely for his family, connections, and wealthy lifestyle. Now she was involved with someone she'd met through her actual work, drawn to his ideas and entrepreneurial drive rather than his social status. I'll be there, I confirmed. Our monthly family dinners had evolved. From tense obligations to genuine opportunities for connection, the old dynamics hadn't disappeared entirely. Change came slowly to established patterns, but they had shifted enough to make these gatherings pleasant rather than painful. That evening, I returned to my apartment, a new one, in a quieter neighborhood, with space for both living and working comfortably. The walls were no longer covered with strategic plans and financial projections. Those documents had served their purpose and been replaced by artwork, travel photographs, and a single framed picture. My grandmother at the ribbon cutting for Thomson Industries' first manufacturing facility, her expression determined and proud. I settled at my desk, opening my own journal, a habit I'd adopted after reading through my grandmother's. Today's entry would document the board's approval of our strategic initiatives, Natalie's growing confidence in her role, the progress at the Westridge site, but it would also capture something less tangible, the sense of rightness, of justice, served not through confrontation, but through creation. What I had built over the past year wasn't just a merged company or a sustainable materials initiative. It was a new reality where merit mattered more than favoritism, where capability was recognized regardless of personality, where hard work and strategic thinking earned their proper rewards. The college fund that had been redirected to purchase, Natalie's Tesla, a symbol of everything that had been wrong with our family dynamic, seemed almost trivial now. My education was progressing as planned, funded by my own resources. The true education, however, had come from executing my grandmother's legacy in ways that transformed not just a company, but a family. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Drinks to celebrate the board approval? A bunch of us from the MBA program are meeting at Riverside at 8. I smiled, texting back my acceptance. This was another change the past year had brought. A social life that extended beyond work and family obligations. Friendships based on shared interests and mutual respect. Marcus had become a valued friend and colleague, his sharp analytical mind and genuine support, a welcome counterpoint to the complex dynamics of my family relationships. As I prepared to leave, My phone rang again. Harriet this time. "I just heard about the board meeting," she said when I answered. "Congratulations on the unanimous approval. That's quite an achievement." "Thank you," I replied, slipping on my jacket. "It's been a productive year." "Indeed it has," she agreed. "I've been thinking about Eleanor today, about what she would make of all this." I paused, considering this. "What do you think she would say?" Harriet chuckled. "I think she'd say, 'You've exceeded her expectations,' which wasn't easy to do. She had high standards." "I had good examples to follow," I said, glancing at my grandmother's photograph. "You did," Harriet acknowledged. "But what you've built goes beyond anything Eleanor envisioned for you. This merger, the Sustainable Materials Initiative, the way you've managed your family relationships through all of it, that's uniquely yours, Rebecca." After we hung up, I stood for a moment in my quiet apartment, contemplating Harriet's words. What I had accomplished over the past year had indeed gone beyond reclaiming what was rightfully mine, or proving my worth to a family that had overlooked me. I had created something new and valuable, something that would have lasting impact beyond my personal vindication. Justice, I reflected, wasn't just about settling scores or claiming what was deserved. True justice was about creating systems where everyone could thrive according to their genuine capabilities, where artificial barriers and biased advantages were removed, where merit and effort determined outcomes. The merger hadn't just saved Walker Construction or expanded Thomson Industries. It had created a company where Natalie could find her authentic strengths, where my father could apply his genuine talents, without the pressure of absolute control, where employees from both organizations could contribute and advance based on their actual abilities. And it had created a family where gradually we were learning to see and value each other honestly, strengths and weaknesses alike. As I headed out to meet friends, I carried this reflection with me. The most satisfying form of justice wasn't revenge or retribution. It was creation. Building something better than what had come before. Something that rendered old injustices obsolete by establishing a new and better reality. My grandmother had understood this when she kept those shares, when she identified me as the one who would carry her legacy forward. She hadn't given me the means to punish my family for their favoritism or to elevate myself above them in retaliation. She had given me the tools to build something that would transform us all. A week later, I stood in the atrium of Thomson Walker headquarters, watching as workers installed a new display in the company museum. A timeline of both companies' histories, culminating in their merger and future vision. My grandmother's portrait featured prominently, alongside photographs of other key figures in the company's evolution. A plaque beneath her image read, "Eleanor Thomson, founder of Thomson Industries. Build for the future, not just for today." Her vision continues to guide our company's commitment to innovation and sustainability. I smiled, remembering those words from her journal. They had indeed guided my approach to both the merger and the Sustainable Materials Initiative, looking beyond immediate gains to long-term value creation. "It's a good likeness," my father said, coming to stand beside me. He studied the portrait thoughtfully. She had that same expression when she negotiated the first supply contract with Walker Construction, back when your grandfather and I were just starting out. "You never told me you knew her professionally before you met Mom," I said, surprised. He nodded. "Eleanor drove a hard bargain, wouldn't budge on quality standards, even when we argued we couldn't afford her materials." A reminiscent smile. She told me, "You can't afford inferior materials either. Build it right, or don't build it at all." Sound advice, I observed. "It was," he agreed. "Changed how we approached our projects from then on." He gestured to the timeline. And now, here we are, 40 years later, merged into one company, with her granddaughter leading our sustainable materials strategy. He shook his head slightly. "Life takes unexpected turns." Some more unexpected than others, I said with a small smile. He returned the smile, acknowledging the understatement. Rebecca, he said after a moment, his tone turning serious, I've been meaning to tell you. Your mother and I have decided to establish a scholarship fund for first-generation college students pursuing business degrees. I raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. That's wonderful. What prompted this? He looked slightly uncomfortable. When we redirected your college fund to Natalie's car, we told ourselves it was a business decision. The truth is, it was favoritism, pure and simple. He met my eyes directly. We can't undo that specific injustice, but we can prevent similar ones for other deserving students. The acknowledgement, so direct, so unequivocal, caught me off guard. We had moved toward reconciliation over the past year, but this level of ownership for past wrongs was new. I think that's an excellent idea, I said finally. Very much in keeping with our corporate values of merit and opportunity. His expression lightened at my approval. We'd like you to help design the selection criteria to ensure it truly supports students who've demonstrated both academic excellence and perseverance. I'd be honored, I said sincerely. As he departed for a meeting, I remained by the timeline display, reflecting on this unexpected development. The scholarship couldn't erase what had happened, couldn't undo the years of being overlooked or the specific injustice of the redirected college fund. But it represented something important: recognition, remorse, and a commitment to change. Just as the merger had created a new reality for both companies, our family was slowly creating a new reality for ourselves. One in which old patterns of favoritism and dismissal were acknowledged and actively corrected, rather than perpetuated. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Time for my weekly call with Professor Wilson, my faculty advisor at Westview. I headed to my office, reflecting on how completely my life had transformed in the span of 18 months. From the overlooked daughter working at a financial firm while secretly accumulating Thomson shares to a graduate student and strategic planning chair, helping to guide a newly merged company, the trajectory had been steep and rewarding. Rebecca, Professor Wilson greeted me when I connected the video call. I've reviewed your case study on the Sustainable Materials Initiative. It's exceptionally thorough, particularly in connecting the financial projections to the market positioning strategy. Thank you, I replied. I had the advantage of insider knowledge. He smiled. Indeed. Which brings me to a question. Has the faculty approached you yet about guest lecturing for our strategic management course next semester? I blinked in surprise. No, they haven't. Well, consider this the approach. Your practical experience with the Thomson-Walker merger would be invaluable for our students, particularly your insights on integrating sustainable practices into traditional industries. The invitation was flattering, but also validating. Recognition of my expertise from an entirely separate sphere than my family or corporate connections. This was purely merit-based acknowledgement of what I had built and what I knew. I'd be delighted, I told him, though I should disclose that my experience is perhaps more complex than the typical corporate merger case study. His eyes twinkled with interest. Complex is good. Complex is real. Our students need to understand that business decisions exist in contexts of personal relationships, family dynamics, and historical patterns. As we discussed the potential structure for the guest lectures, I found myself excited about the opportunity to share not just the technical aspects of the merger, but the deeper lessons it had taught me. About patience and strategic thinking, about the power of merit over favoritism, about building something new rather than simply fighting old battles. After the call ended, I checked my email to find a message from Natalie with the subject line, "Westridge Launch, Feedback Please." Opening it, I found a draft communications plan for the development's official groundbreaking ceremony, scheduled for the following month. It was thorough, professional, and showed genuine strategic thinking about positioning the project in the market. "Thoughts?" she'd written, especially on the sustainability messaging. "Want to make sure I'm representing your initiative accurately." The request for feedback, respectful, professional, acknowledging my expertise without resentment, represented perhaps the most profound change in our relationship. A year ago, Natalie would have either ignored my input entirely or bristled at any suggestion that she needed guidance. Now she was actively seeking it, recognizing the value of collaboration over competition. I replied with specific, constructive feedback, acknowledging the strengths of her plan while suggesting refinements to the technical aspects of the sustainability messaging. It was the kind of professional exchange we had gradually learned to have, focused on the work rather than our history, on building something effective rather than establishing superiority. That evening, as I worked on a case study for my MBA program, I received an unexpected call from my mother. "Rebecca," she began without preamble, "I'm at Eleanor's house, your grandmother's house. The estate agent is preparing to list it next week, and I'm doing a final walkthrough of her personal items." I set down my pen, giving her my full attention. The house had been maintained but unoccupied since my grandmother's death, with the family undecided about its disposition. "I didn't realize it was going on the market. Your father and I finally agreed it was time," she explained. "But that's not why I'm calling. I found something I think you should have." "What is it?" I asked, curiosity piqued. "A set of architectural drawings," she said. "For a building that was never constructed, a research and development center Eleanor wanted to add to Thomson Industries before she sold the company." My interest sharpened. "What kind of research center?" "For sustainable building materials," she said, her voice conveying her own surprise at the discovery. "The plans are dated 20 years ago, Rebecca. Your grandmother was thinking about this direction decades before it became mainstream." I leaned back in my chair, momentarily speechless. The Sustainable Materials Initiative had been my creation, or so I had thought. Now it appeared my grandmother had planted those seeds long ago, envisioning a future for her company that aligned precisely with the direction I had taken it. "There's a note with the plans," my mother continued, "addressed to you." "To me? From 20 years ago?" "No," she clarified. "It's recent, from just before she died." She wrote, "For Rebecca, when she's ready to build the future. The foundation is laid. The vision is yours." I felt a lump form in my throat. Even at the end of her life, my grandmother had been thinking ahead, seeing potential where others didn't, believing in me when my own parents overlooked my capabilities. "Would you like me to bring them to you?" my mother offered. "The plans and the note?" "Yes," I said softly. "I'd like that very much." After we hung up, I sat for a long time, reflecting on the nature of legacies. Not just material ones like shares or property, but intellectual and moral legacies. The values and vision passed from one generation to the next. My grandmother had left me more than a financial stake in her company. She had left me a blueprint for building something meaningful, something that would outlast both of us. And I had built on that blueprint, expanding and adapting it for a new era, just as she had apparently intended. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, energized by the revelation about my grandmother's research center plans. I would need to see them in detail, of course, but already my mind was turning over possibilities for incorporating her original vision into our current sustainable materials initiative. Entering the atrium, I paused again by the company timeline display, studying my grandmother's portrait with new appreciation. She had been planning this outcome, or something like it, for longer than I had realized. Her strategic vision had extended decades into the future, seeing possibilities that others missed. "Ms. Walker?" I turned to find a young woman standing nearby, her expression tentative but determined. I recognized her from the engineering department. one of the recent hires who had been working on the sustainable materials technical specifications. "Yes, Jennifer, isn't it?" She looked pleased to be remembered. "Yes, ma'am. I hope I'm not interrupting, but I wanted to thank you personally for the mentor program you established. It's made a real difference for new employees like me." The program had been one of my first initiatives after the merger, pairing entry-level staff with experienced professionals across departmental lines to encourage knowledge transfer and career development. It had been inspired in part by my own experience of being overlooked despite my capabilities. "I'm glad it's been helpful," I told her sincerely. "That's exactly what it was designed to do, ensure that talent is recognized and developed regardless of seniority or background." She nodded eagerly. "My mentor has been amazing. She's helping me develop a proposal for improving the thermal efficiency of our insulation materials." A brief hesitation. "Actually, I was wondering if you might have time to review it sometime. She thinks it has real potential." The request, so straightforward, so based on merit rather than connection, represented exactly the kind of corporate culture I had been working to establish. In the old Walker construction, advancement had depended on who you knew, who you were related to, whose favor you had curried. In Thomson Walker, it depended on the quality of your ideas and the value of your contribution. "I'd be happy to," I told her. "Send it to my office, and we'll set up a time to discuss it." Her face lit up with genuine excitement. "Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity." As she hurried away, I felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond personal or professional accomplishment. This was the true meaning of justice served, not simply righting a specific wrong done to me, but creating systems where such wrongs were less likely to occur for anyone. The college fund that had been redirected to buy Natalie's Tesla had indeed been an injustice, a symbol of the favoritism that had defined our family dynamic for decades. But in responding to that injustice by building something new, rather than simply seeking retribution, I had helped create a reality where merit mattered more than preference, where contribution was valued over connection. My grandmother's secret, trust fund, the Thomson shares she had left me, had been the tool that enabled this transformation. But the vision, the perseverance, the strategic execution, those had been mine, just as she had intended. The company we had created together, across time, across generations, stood as testament to a different way of doing business and a different way of valuing people. One based on what they contributed rather than who they were or who they knew. And my family, transformed by this new reality, had begun to heal in ways I hadn't dared to hope for when I first received that small key and the letter that changed everything. As I headed to my office to begin the day's work, I passed Natalie in the hallway, deep in conversation with a client about the Westridge launch communications. She paused to introduce me, her manner professional and respectful. "This is my sister, Rebecca Walker," she said. "She chairs our strategic planning committee and developed the sustainable materials initiative that makes Westridge unique in the market." The simple acknowledgement, accurate, generous, devoid of the resentment or dismissal that would have colored such an introduction a year ago, was perhaps the clearest evidence of how far we had come. Justice, I reflected as I continued to my office, wasn't just about getting what you deserved. It was about creating systems where everyone received what they deserved. Recognition based on contribution, opportunity based on capability, advancement based on merit rather than favoritism or fortune of birth. My grandmother had understood this. In leaving me her shares, she hadn't simply provided for my future or ensured I could get my MBA despite my parents' decision to redirect my college fund. She had given me the means to create a more just reality, for myself, for my family, and for everyone connected to the companies we had merged. The college fund had been taken from me, but what I had built in response was worth far more than money could measure. It was a legacy of merit, of capability recognized and rewarded, of justice served not through retribution, but through creation. As I settled at my desk, opening my grandmother's journal to a passage I had found particularly insightful, I felt a sense of completion. Not an ending. There was still much to build, much to learn, much to create. But a milestone reached. A circle closed. The Tesla that had symbolized my parents' favoritism toward Natalie had long since been sold, a practical decision when her executive salary was replaced by entry-level compensation. In its place, she now drove a modest hybrid, purchased with her own earnings and chosen for its environmental credentials rather than its status value. I smiled at the symmetry. Like the car, our family had been transformed, becoming more practical, more sustainable, more authentic in how we valued each other and ourselves. Justice had indeed been served, not by restoring what was, but by creating what could be. Not by looking backward in resentment, but by building forward with vision. Just as my grandmother had taught me, through both her words and her example. Her secret trust fund hadn't just been shares in a company. It had been trust in me, in my capability, my judgment, my potential to build something meaningful from what she had begun. That trust had been the greatest inheritance of all, and I had proven worthy of it. 5 years had passed since the Thomson-Walker merger, and I found myself once again standing on the rooftop terrace of our headquarters, watching the sunset paint the lakeside skyline in hues of gold and amber. My MBA from Westview was long completed, and my role at Thomson-Walker had evolved from chairing the Strategic Planning Committee to becoming Chief Innovation Officer, overseeing our expanding portfolio of sustainable building technologies. The company had thrived beyond even my optimistic projections. Our sustainable materials division now accounted for nearly 40% of total revenue, with international clients seeking our expertise for green building projects across 3 continents. The West Ridge development had won multiple awards for environmental design and had become a case study at leading business schools, including Westview, where I occasionally guest lectured. But today wasn't about business achievements. Today was more personal. "I thought I might find you up here," came a familiar voice. I turned to see my father approaching, his hair now more gray than brown, his posture still commanding despite the passage of years. As co-CEO of the construction division, he had found a renewed sense of purpose, focusing on what he did best while embracing the more collaborative leadership structure we had established. "Big day tomorrow," he said, coming to stand beside me at the railing. I nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions. 5 years since the merger. Hard to believe. "That's not what I meant," he said with a gentle smile. "Though that milestone is certainly worth celebrating too." I knew what he was referring to. Tomorrow would mark the official launch of the Eleanor Thomson Foundation for Educational Equity, a nonprofit established with a portion of my Thomson Industries shares, dedicated to providing college funding for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds. "Grandmother would have approved, I think," I said, gazing out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "She would have done more than approve," my father replied. "She would have been immensely proud. This foundation embodies everything she valued: strategic thinking, long-term vision, creating opportunities based on merit rather than circumstance." Coming from him, this understanding of my grandmother's values represented how far our relationship had evolved. 5 years ago, he had barely acknowledged her influence on me. Now he recognized and respected the legacy she had entrusted to my care. "The first class of scholarship recipients has impressive credentials," I commented. 20 students who might otherwise have had their education derailed by financial constraints. Just as mine nearly had been, though neither of us stated this obvious parallel aloud. Some wounds had healed enough to touch gently, but not to press upon. "Natalie's media campaign for the launch has been quite effective," my father observed, She's found her niche in the communications department. This was true. After starting at entry level and working diligently to learn the business properly, my sister had risen to become our director of corporate communications, earning the A position through genuine accomplishment rather than nepotism. Our relationship had settled into one of mutual respect. Not the closeness some siblings enjoyed, but a genuine appreciation for each other's contributions, both professionally and personally. The door to the terrace opened again, and Harriet appeared. Though officially retired from legal practice, she served as chairperson of the Foundation's board of directors, bringing her sharp mind and ethical compass to its governance. "There you are," she said, approaching us with a folder in hand. "The final documentation for tomorrow's announcement. Just needs your signature." As I signed the papers making the foundation official, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. From the overlooked daughter whose college fund had been given to her sister, to the architect of a foundation that would ensure other deserving students never faced similar obstacles. "Your grandmother's legacy continues to grow," Harriet observed, following my thoughts with the intuition that had made her such a valuable mentor. "Though I suspect even she would be surprised by how far you've taken it." We chatted for a while longer about the foundation's plans, the scholarship selection criteria, the mentorship program that would pair recipients with professionals in their fields of interest. More than just financial support, we were creating a pathway for talented individuals to develop their full potential, regardless of their background or family circumstances. As twilight deepened into evening, my mother joined us, bringing news that Natalie had arrived at the house with final preparations for the family dinner celebrating the foundation launch. "Everything's ready," she said, "just waiting for the guest of honor." The guest of honor title made me smile. There had been a time when such recognition within our family would have been unthinkable, when my accomplishments were noted with polite disinterest before conversation turned quickly to Natalie's latest activities. Now, the dynamic had shifted to something more balanced, more appreciative of each person's genuine contributions. As we gathered our things to leave, my father paused, gazing out at the cityscape one last time. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "when I look at what you've built, the merged company, the sustainable materials division, now this foundation, I realize something I missed for too many years." "What's that?" I asked. "That success isn't about who gets the most attention or recognition. It's about who creates something of lasting value." He turned to me with genuine admiration in his eyes. "You chose to build rather than destroy, to create rather than complain, even when you had every reason to be bitter." It was perhaps the most insightful thing my father had ever said to me. The choice he identified, to build rather than destroy, had indeed been the defining decision of my adult life. When faced with the injustice of my college fund being redirected to buy Natalie a Tesla, I could have chosen the path of open resentment or destructive retaliation. Instead, I had channeled that energy into creating something meaningful. "I had good examples," I said, thinking of my grandmother's journal entries about perseverance and strategic vision. "And I learned that justice doesn't always look like what you might expect." Later that evening, as our family gathered around the dinner table, a setting once fraught with tension but now generally pleasant, I found myself reflecting on how completely things had transformed. The college fund that had been taken from me had led, through a chain of events I could never have predicted, to the creation of a foundation that would fund countless students' educations for generations to come. Natalie raised her glass in a toast. "To the Eleanor Thomson Foundation," she said, "and to my sister, who turns obstacles into opportunities better than anyone I know." As glasses clinked and conversation flowed, I felt a sense of completion. Not an ending. There were still many chapters to write, many innovations to develop, many lives to impact through our work, but a circle closed. A restoration not of what had been taken, but of something far more valuable: purpose, recognition, meaningful contribution. My grandmother's secret trust fund had been more than financial resources. It had been a vote of confidence, a belief in my potential to build something significant. And in honoring that trust, I had created not just a merged company or a foundation, but a new pattern for myself, for my family, and for those who would benefit from our efforts for years to come. The Tesla that had once symbolized everything wrong with our family's dynamics had long since been replaced. In its stead stood something far more enduring, a legacy of merit recognized, of potential fulfilled, of justice served not through retribution, but through creation. As dinner concluded and conversation shifted to plans for the Foundation's future initiatives, I excused myself briefly, stepping out to the garden for a moment of quiet reflection. The night air was cool and clear, the stars visible despite the city lights nearby. "You were right, grandmother," I whispered to the quiet darkness. "Building something new is more powerful than fighting what exists. Creating is more satisfying than complaining. And the most meaningful justice comes not from getting even, but from making things better." Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to apply the lessons I had learned. But tonight, in this moment of peaceful reflection, I could appreciate how far we had all come, and how sometimes what seems like an ending is merely the foundation for a far better beginning. My college fund had been taken, but what I had built in response would fund countless educations for generations to come. It wasn't just justice served, it was justice transformed into something greater than anyone could have imagined.